close your eyes. Take your thumb and forefinger and feel a piece of your clothing. Don't feel your neighbour's clothing, because that'd be weird. As you feel the fabric, what does it tell you? Do you know how many hands were involved in making it? How far has it travelled? What is it made of? What is its history? What is its story? Please open your eyes. Every piece of clothing has a story. There are good stories and there are bad stories. We all need to be conscious of the stories that our clothes tell. My relationship with clothing started early when I would see my mother make her own clothes. And she would start by putting a pattern on top of fabric and would cut out the pattern pieces. The cat would come and jump all over it. Then she would take these pattern pieces and sew them into clothing by hand or on the sewing machine. My mother would also buy bags of raw wool, and she would take this wool and clean it, brush it, then comb it, then spin it by hand on a spinning wheel into fine yarn. Then she would prepare the yarn, put it on a hand loom, and weave it into the most beautiful fabrics. This really had an influence on me, and it ultimately led me to my career in fashion. I've studied and worked around the world, from New York to Paris to Melbourne and beautiful Hobart here in Tasmania. And during this time, I became aware of the fashion industry impact, and there were a lot of bad stories that were really confronting. The defining moment for me was when I realised there are also a lot of good stories. And I became obsessed with these good stories, and I realised I wanted to not only tell these good stories, I wanted to be part of creating them. Every piece of clothing has a story. There are good stories and there are bad stories. We all need to be conscious of the stories that our clothes tell. So let me tell you the story of this dress. It's 100% made and designed here in Tasmania. But there's more to the story. This dress is made of wool. We've given each of you one of these cards in your bag. Can you please bring it out? It's got wool on it and a picture of a sheep. Fantastic. This is Alice Jr. She's a very special sheep from a very special farm. And each of you are holding a piece of Alice Jr. And she's very happy about that. Can you feel the softness of the wool? Can you also feel the coarse, raw edges? Perhaps you can smell the native grasses and the freshness of rain in every fibre. I'll tell you a little bit more about Alice Jr. shortly. When I started designing this dress, there were a number of considerations. Consideration number one, purpose. It had to be made in a way that aligned with my values, and I asked, can I be transparent about how it's made and where it's made? Can it be ethically made and sustainably sourced? Can I use local materials and can it be locally made? Will it have a positive impact on our community? And what will happen at the end of life of this dress? Consideration number two, fabric. I decided to use wool because it's a natural fibre, it's renewable, and it's biodegradable. And why this wool? Because it comes from a very special farm in Oatlands, Tasmania. And you met Alice Jr. earlier. Well, this is her home. And this farm is owned and run by an extraordinary woman called Nan Bray. And what makes white gum wool unique? It's the carefully cultivated biodiversity of the land and the thoughtful animal welfare. The sheep have excellent nutrition. They wag their happy tails as they graze on native weeds and grasses. The lambs stay with their mothers, and there is a no-kill policy, which means that every sheep lives out its entire life on the farm. And the result is some of the most amazing wool in the world. It is superfine merino of exceptional quality. Consideration number 3, design. The main intention of designing this dress was to showcase the wool, but just because it's sustainable doesn't mean it can't be beautiful. This dress had to be elegant and timeless. It also had to fit well, because when it fits well, you love and wear it more and keep it for longer. It also had to be a quality piece that could be handed down for generations. Consideration number 4, manufacturing. It was really important to be able to work with local skills, and I was fortunate enough to meet 2 women, Marilyn Teisel and Felicity Dawson, who between them have 120 years of professional knitting experience. Collaboration was important, and every stitch was done by hand. This dress took 122,794 stitches to make by hand. Consideration number 5, transport. This dress has travelled in a small triangle of distance around Tasmania. It's travelled hundreds of kilometres, with the only exception being that the yarn is spun in New Zealand. Consideration number 6, transparency. The entire process from start to finish is traceable and transparent. Consideration number 7, end of life, longevity. This dress is designed to be a well-loved piece that is reworn for many years and handed down for generations. But if, after many years of care and repair, this dress comes to the end of its life, it's biodegradable and will take approximately 6 months to go back to the earth. Consideration number 8, economic benefits. Everyone benefits from this process. There are economic benefits for Nan Bray and the farm, for the suppliers, for the makers, for me and my business, and for Tasmania and the local economy. So these 8 areas were the key considerations that were non-negotiable in making this dress. And I think the story of this dress is not just a good story, I think it's a great story. So am I asking you to go out and only buy handmade items? Of course not. I'm asking you to do the best you can with what you have. Choose to ask questions about the clothes you buy and wear. What is it made of? Where did it come from? How was it made? And who made it? And choose to rewear your clothes for as long as possible. Rewear, repair, resell, repurpose, rent, and recycle responsibly. And now I'd like to tell you the story of another piece of clothing. It's the story of this t-shirt I bought a few days ago. This t-shirt is made and designed as part of a fast fashion model. It's a term you might have heard before. So let's break down the story. The first part of the story, purpose. What is the purpose of this t-shirt for a fast fashion company? To make money, to appeal to a mass market, to be as cheap as possible, and to be designed, made and sold as quickly as possible. The second part of the story, fabric. This t-shirt is made of polyester. Polyester is a man-made synthetic fibre. It's a type of plastic, no different from a plastic bag. It comes from crude oil and is non-renewable. Polyester is cheap to produce compared to natural fibres like cotton, silk and wool. Polyester has negative impacts for the environment. It's highly energy intensive to produce. And when washed, polyester fabric releases tiny little plastic microfibres about 1 millimetre in length into waterways, into the oceans, inside marine life, inside our food supply, and they've also been found inside an unborn child. The third part of the story, design. This t-shirt is designed to be as cheap as possible, to sell to as many people as quickly as possible. Some of these companies produce millions and millions of these annually. And if the purpose of this t-shirt is ultimately designed to be thrown away, this means there are millions of tons of clothing sent to landfill every single year. Consideration number 4, manufacturing. There is little to no transparency for a fast fashion company. And this means that brands like this are likely to be underpaying, overworking, and exploiting their garment workers. Consideration number 5, transport. This t-shirt has raked up more frequent flyer miles than you and I. It's travelled tens of thousands of kilometres to get here. And this is obviously really bad for the environment. Consideration number 6, transparency. The entire process from start to finish is vastly untraceable and lacks transparency. Consideration number 7, end of life. There is no end of life strategy for this polyester t-shirt. It's ultimately been designed to be thrown away. And polyester does not break down in the environment like natural fibres. Instead, it stays in landfill for up to 200 years. This is an image of 2 pieces of clothing. It might not look like it right now. Originally, it was a woolen jumper on the top and a polyester t-shirt on the bottom. They were put in the ground at the same time. After 6 months, they were dug up, and this is the end result. The polyester t-shirt was completely intact. You could wash it and wear it in a pristine condition. The woolen jumper had already started to break down and go back to the earth. But what's more, after 4 years sitting in a box, nothing had changed with the polyester t-shirt. But the woolen jumper had almost completely broken down. Consideration number 8, the 8th part of the story, economic benefits. It's true that companies like this do employ a lot of people in areas like design, retail environments and transport, so they do have an economic impact. But how much of it is local economic impact? The good story I shared with you before of this dress is 100% economic impact, with a vast amount of the money staying here in Australia. But considering the amount of clothes they sell, these companies have a disproportionate amount of economic impact locally, often with all profits going offshore and little to no tax being paid here in Australia. And these offshore models also lead to loss of skills and loss of an industry in many countries, which is certainly the case here in Australia. So clearly, this is a bad story. But what's worse is that there are millions and millions of these being made, being bought, and being thrown away every single year. So, am I asking you to go home and throw away all your polyester clothing and send it to landfill? Of course not. I am asking you to do the best you can with what you have. Choose to ask questions about the clothes you buy and wear. What is it made of? Where did it come from? How was it made? And who made it? And choose to re-wear your clothes for as long as possible. Re-wear, repair, resell, repurpose, rent, and recycle responsibly. So I get that I've told the puppies and unicorn good story and the dark and sinister bad story. But this is the truth of the situation. And you may be asking, what can I do? What can you do? What can we all do? It's up to us, when we're buying clothing, to choose to be part of the good stories. This is an image of a product by a startup company here in Australia that is helping people like you and I to become an active part of the story of our clothes. Imagine if you could scan a tag and get the full, honest, open and transparent story about the piece. Imagine the impact that this would have on our buying decisions. This dress has a small button-like tag called an NFC tag. By scanning it with your phone, you gain access to the entire history of the dress from source to your wardrobe. You can see sourcing maps, videos of makers, and more. But what's exciting is that you, the wearer, can also become a part of the story by adding your own narratives and your own stories of the garment into the timeline. And what happens if this dress gets passed to a new owner? Then they become a part of the story also. So you can see that technology is helping to become part of the solution. But we also need to be demanding better stories. Choose to ask questions from the companies you buy from. And we can also ask questions of ourselves. Do I need it? Will I wear it? Will I rewear, repair, resell, repurpose, rent, and recycle responsibly? And now, please take a moment and just feel a piece of your clothing once again. In fact, every time you feel a piece of clothing, ask yourself, what is the story? And remember, every piece of clothing has a story. There are good stories and there are bad stories. Please play your part in helping to tell more good stories about the clothes you wear.